Hey guys, welcome back to John Rule 16. I am your host Javon, and today I introduce you to the true Budget King. That's right, today we're doing another benchmark suite again where I test a bunch of games with the RX 570 8GB VRAM graphics card. The 8GB version, which is much better than the 4GB version I had before, I gotta tell ya. Regardless though, the test benchmark suite test rig I'm using is the i3-10105 with boost clock up to 4.2 gigahertz. It kind of stays there the whole time, so it's pretty much 4.2 gigahertz. We're running with 32 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM with a speed of 2667 megahertz, because that's how much the motherboard supports. And here is the RX 570 with its 8 gigs of glorious VRAM. We're running every game on an SSD, and we have an SSD for the boot drive, so nothing should be an issue with load times or anything like that. And we are using the normal clock speeds and memory clock for the GPU, but I do have the power limit set to -13 because this version of the card gets extremely toasty. I paid 45 bucks for this, and for 45 bucks it is awesome. Most of these titles will actually run better than the GTX 970 quite largely, and you can always keep the texture quality up to high because we have 8 gigs of VRAM. Once again, this graphics card was released in 2017, so it's going about it's literally, today is literally 7 years. 7 years it's been out now, and it does great. That could just be the BIOS version, by the way, so don't quote me on that. But it's been 7 years, and it runs amazingly well today, although everything probably will be played at low with high textures and whatnot. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoy this. Don't forget to please leave a like, comment, share, subscribe, and let's get into some benchmarks. Thought I'd start with the classic this time around with Grand Theft Auto 5 running at 1080p on the very high preset. We are using MSAA timed to 2 times, and well, once again, this runs without any issue because it's GTA 5 and it's like 9 years old. What did you expect? Guys, this one's going to be a great experience once again. I did notice that this one runs worse than the GTX 970, but once again, I guess it favors NVIDIA. But the game does run fine at over 60 FPS on average at all times, so there's no issues here. There's never anything to talk about with GTA 5 when I test on anything, any of these types of high-end GPUs, that for the time at least. So there's not much else to say. So if you haven't realized by now, I'm really comparing the RX 570 and the GTX 970 together. Forspoken did really well at 1080p, very low with the high textures and FSR set to ultra performance. The game ran surprisingly well. It looked terrible, but it ran surprisingly well. We were getting over 50 FPS on average for the most part, realistically. Yeah, that average is going to stay in the 50s for the entirety, even in combat scenarios when the FPS does drop into the 40s, but for the most part, it will hit in the 50s range, which I thought was great. The game looked completely blurry. I couldn't tell what was going on half the damn time with ultra performance. That's some heavy FSR, but if you just play this at 30 FPS, you could probably drop that down to maybe the balance preset, and this would be somewhat of a smooth experience. We have the VRAM so that the texture quality still stays high, so yeah, this one could be a win. Budget. This one also surprised me. Horizon Forbidden West at 1080p on the very low preset with medium textures and FSR set to ultra performance. I did see this one also really surpass the GTX 970 once again. The GTX 970 was getting about 45 FPS on average, where here it's in the 50s for the most part, and it dipped into the 30s. Here this doesn't dip into the 30s once, and it's tested in the same area. It really shows the RX 570. Like I said, the RX 570 is superior to the GTX 970. If you could get between the both, you definitely need to get the RX 570. You will have a bit more longevity, especially the 8 gig version. You will have more longevity because of the 8 gigabytes of VRAM, which is why I put the settings to medium, the textures to medium, and it runs surprisingly well. This is an okay experience. This game looks really good, even with ultra performance FSR, which is more than I can say for Forspoken. This looks really good still, so this is definitely playable. Moving on. A Plague Tale Requiem coming in once again doing smashingly well at 1080p low with ultra textures and FSR set to ultra performance. We were able to see over 60 FPS on average. That will dip as this is the most demanding area, one of the most demanding areas in the game, especially when we go for the overlook. This one also beat the GTX 970 quite heavily in terms of performance. We are having fun here, guys, by at least 10 to 15 frames. It is crazy. I just can't believe it at this point. Once again, this game looks really good, even at with ultra performance. It scales very well. Even with ultra textures, the VRAM is barely 3.2 gigabytes. On low textures, it uses like it's at 1.6. Like, it's crazy how well this scales. But yeah, A Plague Tale Requiem is definitely playable nowadays. Moving on. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart comes in, and this game is demanding no matter what you run it on. So at 1080p, very low with the high textures and FSR set to ultra performance, we were seeing over 50 FPS, but we were getting some dips below. As you can see, the 1% are at 47. This still will give you a smooth experience, as this is probably one of the most demanding areas of the game, but it does handle it quite well. Once again, these are the latest versions of these games, and they have been updated quite well, that you can still run these games on an RX 570. I'd say Budget King is definitely a true statement, especially with the high textures. I'm able to still do high textures. It helps out dramatically. The game still looks quite good, and as you can see, we are hitting over 60 FPS in certain scenarios. A lot of them, actually. Like, it's probably going to be an average over 60 once we move to the other worlds as well. The game will perform, but once again, all of these games have to be played on the low preset. It's just too demanding otherwise. The Callisto Protocol was an interesting one for me because I kind of changed up the settings on this one. At 1080p medium with the high textures and FSR set to only quality, we did see an average of around 50 FPS, but as you can see, those frame times are screwed up. Certain settings can really mess up the FSR, especially in this area here, which is quite demanding, but I thought for the most part this ran quite well. We could have used a heavier implementation of FSR, or I could have just done 1080p low to get a smooth frame time graph, but I wanted to show you that the RX 570 will perform better than the GTX 970 once again in this scenario. So it runs well. We're using about 5.5 gigabytes of VRAM. Once again, the textures are set to high and it looks great for what it is. With Marvel Spider-Man Remastered, I did notice I could bump up the settings a bit more as well. As you can see, it is hovering under 60 FPS because I actually added more settings. We're running at 1080p on the medium preset this time, with very high textures and FSR set to quality. A heavier dose of FSR maybe to balance probably would have given us 60 FPS on average, but for the most part I deemed this the best visually and still gave us quite a lot of decent performance throughout the game. I couldn't really complain. With the very high textures, we are using over 7 gigabytes of VRAM, but this will manage to maintain this the entire time. The RX 570, guys, 8 gig version, champion. Resident Evil 4 Remake also runs quite well on here. At 1080p on the balanced preset with FSR set to quality, the game did run over 60 FPS as well. We're using different settings than we did for the GTX 970 simply because of once again the more VRAM we have. As you can see, it is using over 4.6 right now. I did notice some stutter, but I'm kind of lacking that up to my SSD that I'm running this on, which is kind of weird. But it is happening. I did notice it happen in every video, and it doesn't normally happen like that. So just keep that in mind. But for the most part, Resident Evil 4 will be a great experience once again on an RX 570. Final Fantasy VII Remake. this one runs good on anything. I keep saying this over and over and over again at this point. We're using high textures this time though, and low shadows, and well, because we have the VRAM once again, and as you can see, the game will perform quite well. We are getting some stutters every once in a while. I did notice we are getting a bit of stutter every once in a while, but I chalk it up to me now loading in the game for the first time. And yeah, this is going to be over 60 FPS on average. You can practically just run this one, but as you can see, the high textures really do come in handy because look, it's using over 5 right now, and it will only keep going up as the game progresses. And finally, once again, we have The Last of Us Part 1 with frame gen really damn helps out, man. This is crazy. Anyway, at 1080p on the low preset with medium textures. Everything in the textures tab has been set to medium. We're using FSR quality with frame gen, and as you can see, this is amazing. This makes the game so playable. It is insane. I keep saying this over and over again. Frame gen is awesome. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Once again, don't forget to please leave a like, comment, share, subscribe, and stick around for more epic content. What did you guys think of this video? Was it great? Would you like to see other videos like this on the channel? Lower end GPUs? Leave a comment down below and I'll get to them eventually. We're going to do a lot of these with lesser RAM as well because I know you guys like less RAM and stuff like that. But for the most part, the RX 570 is still the true budget king. And with FSR, it still manages to hold up to today's standards, I guess.